Welcome back to the Fishing for Men podcast, a part of Fishing for Men Ministries. Fishing for Men exists to help equip men, build community, and live lives transformed by Christ. We're so grateful to have you back with us today. I'm your host, Brandon, and today we're picking up our conversation from the last episode where me, Billy, and Spencer are working our way through Matthew 5, verses 17 through 30. Today we'll pick up in verse 21, so listen in and follow along.
So let's jump into 21. So he says, "You have heard it said to our ancestors," is what the translation of the CSB says, "do not murder, for whoever murders will be subject to judgment." Don't we keep going? Just to finish that thought. Okay, sure. But I tell you, everyone who is angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Whoever insults his brother or sister will be subject to the court, and whoever says "you fool" will be subject to hellfire. That's really touchy-feely.
Yep. Want to dive in, Spencer?
There's just one area of it, and it's later in 22 where the thing that I highlighted, because this is where I'm curious about are these literal? Because you go through the rest of this and it talks about the court. So is this like the court of Roman times, or is this a spiritual? Because I just recently in some of my readings going through Bible Project, they talk about this idea of the council, God's council.
Yeah, the divine council.
The divine council. And so I'm like, okay, because in my interpretation, it says you'll be liable to the council. So I immediately said, is this...
I think it's the Sanhedrin is what it is referring to.
Okay.
Yeah. They're trying to tie it back into like what a court would look like.
Yeah, so making it relevant to their language.
Yeah, to their language. Got it. Like, hey, I want you to know that if you act this way, this is the equivalent of here.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So I think it starts off in verse 21 with, "You have heard it, that it was said." That in its own self is kind of a controversial statement. So when rabbis would teach, they didn't do it on their own authority. So they were...
The word authority is actually a big deal.
Yeah, they didn't do it of their own authority. They did it under the teaching of their rabbi. So you were, think about, Billy and I are in grad school right now. So, you can't claim something that's not your own idea. You have to have a citation. So it's almost like that. Like,
and I think they actually had to have two.
Okay, two.
Yeah, in order to gain authority, you had to have two people that agreed with this quote unquote, maybe new idea. Yeah. So Jesus is saying, "You have heard it said," and he's quoting something from the Old Testament. But then verse 22, when he says, "But I say," that's like throwing it down. And it's really strange because he didn't go to school.
Yeah.
Like they did. He didn't grow up and go through this elitist school to become a Pharisee. And so this is actually a super scandalous thing to say of like,
on whose authority?
But if you go back,
authority.
like think about all the times where they say he speaks as if somebody with authority.
Yeah.
And we think like, like just somebody in charge.
Or, sound smart,
really articulate. Like, no. There's actually a significance to that word authority there. And so he's like really shaking things up by saying,
the Pharisees are like seething in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just to call out, the "you shall not murder" is actually a specific command from the Old Testament.
I believe it's the 6th of the 10.
Yep. And then it's repeated several times. I think even in like Deuteronomy too. Yeah. In my Bible, it actually bolds them out to like make sure you know that they're different than that. So, But I tell you, I can just imagine. I just see this group of people on the side like, do what now? Okay, so he says, now we go from murder, which is this outward physical action, will be subject to judgment. Okay, fair. Like I think we all get that. But he says, no. Whoever's just angry with your brother or your sister will be subject to judgment. So he's now significantly, I think, raised the bar.
Yeah. So now he's speaking on authority he didn't quote unquote earn. Like they did.
Yeah.
But also making it even harder after they've done a good enough job adding their own level of complexity to these laws.
One back thing to the authority piece. A lot of people will say that the way in which he got authority was whenever he went through the baptism. And so the dove was the Spirit, which was the one that gave him the authority, and then God speaking, hey, this is my son who I'm well.
So those are his two.
Those were his two that then gave him authority to then go start his ministry. Yeah. So he obviously does have it, but yeah, so people are thinking he doesn't have this, and now he's just ratcheted up this idea of anger.
Yeah.
Being something that you're going to face judgment from. And then we jump in and we're going, okay, now he's going to take it. That's not good enough. So we're going to drive this point home some more. He says, okay, whenever he's just angry in our heart, but now whoever insults his brother or sister will be subject to the court. Mm-hmm. And then he says it again. Actually, my NASB actually says...
it gives the Aramaic word.
No, it says whoever's angry will be answerable to the court. And then this next one is just a little bit different. It says, but whoever says to his brother, you good for nothing, shall be answerable to the Supreme Court. And then whoever says you fool. So there's, which is different than my CSB, which just says whoever insults and then says you fool, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. So something interesting is going on here. Mm-hmm. If you look at the action, so being angry, insults, and says fool, like I think they're diminishing in severity. Like to be mad at someone, to insult someone, and then to just, I don't want to say just, but to call someone a fool. But the consequence of it goes in the opposite order.
Yeah, like inverse.
Yeah. So it goes from judgment to being sent to court to the fires of hell. So I think it's interesting that he does that, but I think that's meant to show that like even like the smallest part of your attitude and how you think of people matters.
Yeah. Which goes back to that righteousness.
Yes. Are you in love? And because I think that's one thing that's going on underneath this, and this is what Jesus is getting at. And we're talking about his authority is he's going back, in the verses we read earlier, he says, I'm not getting rid of the Old Testament commands. Mm-hmm. He's reinterpreting for them to show them what God's intention was behind them. Going back to, I'm going to take us on a bit of a rabbit trail to get to a point. Those laws, so the 10 Commandments and the laws that God gave the Israelites back when they were in the desert in the books of the Torah, to us, we read them and lots of them seem nonsensical, like why did they need that, or that's not relevant to me now. But a lot of those laws were put into place based on the context of the Israelites and the surrounding, the surrounding nations. Mm-hmm. What was the standard for them? And God said, no, I'm going to take you out of that and make you a righteous people, a nation of priests, so that through you, other people will see me and be drawn to me. So he set this standard to it. Yep. Well, then we talked about how it was interpreted over the years and stuff, and Jesus is coming back and saying, this is what God's intention was behind those laws all along. Your attitude matters.
When you say that, I almost hear the word, he's actually making you more human.
Yeah. And I think that's like super important, because why does it matter if I say, Billy, you're stupid? Why'd you say that?
You're demeaning an image bearer.
You're taking away that identity of, yeah.
What's interesting about this, I actually read something different, which is that they were actually in progressive order. Like okay. the insults were. So one went from an internal in the heart. They described it as just a regular insult. So like the word rakam, which is the second one.
The middle one?
Yep, the middle one was used just to mean worthless or good for nothing. Still not great to call somebody that. And this is where I dug into this, because this word fool, it's spelled more, it's spelled more, but it has a little thing over the top. Yeah. There's some differences on what people think it means. One has the opposite, like what you talked about, where it's like diminishing. But then the other version or interpretation that I read said it actually escalated, and when you called somebody a fool, it meant they were godless and good, despising, moral reprobate. Which I thought was, I'm like, that's way worse.
Yeah.
But it speaks to the importance of like understanding the context of the language that's used.
Yeah. But I also think there's another even piece in here too of like, those are more or less like we would say, hey, those are just words. How many times did you grow up and say, what's the phrase? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jesus is really putting a nice little stiff arm to that, saying, no, your words deeply matter.
Because out of the overflow of your heart you speak, right? So it's reflecting what's going on internally.
And I even think back to, every time I think about words, and even, I'm teaching my kids that of like, man, words matter. Like God spoke things into existence. Like his words created things. And then he created you as an image bearer to reflect him. Yes, you have limits as a human being, but you also have like your words are powerful just like his are.
Yeah, to build up.
They're to build up life or they tear you down.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a point that Jesus is even driving home here of like, hey, these are the way you treat people, not just even from what you may believe in your heart about them and then translates into the mind, but the words that come out of your mouth are deeply meaningful and can really crush people.
Yeah. I just, that's really good. And I go back to verse 20 where Jesus says, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees, like how many days am I able to go without doing some version of this?
Yeah. Good God.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it's not an excuse for me to be like, oh well.
Nor is it my default.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like without the Holy Spirit in me helping me, I can't live like this.
Like talk about a need for dependence.
Yeah. But you see good examples of it though, talking about righteousness in the Old Testament that he's just referenced, because I go back to every time like in 1st and 2nd Kings and Samuel, where they talk about a king's like, but King so-and-so walked in the statutes.
Yeah.
And you look at Solomon and his reign and he walked and he was able to think about like all of the relationships with his borders, his enemies. And like, was it King Hiram of Lebanon? Like this was a specific point. Like he walked in the statutes, had righteousness because then he was in, good standing. And his relationships, even with people who weren't part of Israel, were blessed. And he had like that peace in his relationships. And that's how he was able to get all the resources to build the temple and some of that. I mean, it was kind of interesting. So I just kind of drawing those parallels right now.
No, that's cool.
Through it. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Well, I think that's important because we see, again, it's one continuous story. We see that stuff. It didn't just pop up in the New Testament. So I like that.
And then maybe one last point before we jump to the next few is I wrote this little piece in my notes that just said Cain. And I'm wondering if, as they're listening to that and hearing "do not murder," that's the story that pops in their mind.
Well, that's the first, right? Yeah, definitely a hyperlink. I mean, there's so many stories of murder in the Old Testament that you could link back to. I just want to add one little side note here. So you'll be liable to the fires of hell. So Billy and I have talked about doing a study on what heaven is described as and what hell is described in as the Bible, because I've never traced where we've gotten those images that I think is common for us, like heaven being up in the clouds and we're floating around and it's blue skies. I don't know. And then hell being something underground with like fire and, torment. Here, what's interesting is that word for hell is, it's referring to a valley outside of Jerusalem. So the valley of the son of Genom or something. It's Gehenna is the word in Greek, but that was what you hear in the Old Testament about how God detests them sacrificing their young children to a god. And that's the valley where they did that. So it's like this place where they totally distorted God's will, where they totally got off track, and they were killing innocent babies. And so it's like Jesus is this image of hell that Jesus refers to, because I don't think the word hell is referred to in the Bible that much. He's referring to this disgusting place that's like completely outside of God's will. And interesting, later it ends up becoming where they burn human waste later on. So it's just a disgusting bad place. But
yeah, absolutely. Given time, I'm going to skip the next few and kind of jump into the next section, which is the really, really fun one about adultery. Committing. Or no, just kidding. Is it that? Yeah.
So we're skipping ahead to verse
27. 27, yep. You have heard it said, do not commit adultery, but I tell you, everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Ouch.
Okay, are we done with the episode?
Yeah. All right, see you guys later. We're just going to stop there. And then he's like, hey, you know what? If your right eye causes you to sin, you should just rip it out of there.
So is this Jesus advocating body mutilation? Is that
Absolutely. He didn't just cut it off after that.
Okay.
Yeah. He really drives it home.
Why aren't we all going around maimed?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't believe we hold that high of a standard today. No. I'll just be blunt with it. And there's a lot more here. There's a lot on divorce and marriage, and he actually gets down to divorce too. Like Jesus has a very clear perspective on this, and actually was a really big debate in their day. We won't get into any of that, but man, like thinking about, hey, I didn't actually like do anything, so I haven't committed adultery, but just the fact of like anyone who looks at a woman lustfully, like that's really difficult. I think for men, because here's the interesting part is like God designed you to see beautiful things. And women are part of his creation and are beautiful. But there's, this is back to that tension of how do you look at a beautiful woman not lustfully? Yeah. I think is where we have the challenge. But I think there is a way to actually do that. I've heard one pastor describe it as, like, sure, you may look at a woman and think she's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what you were designed to do. It's the second look, or it's the second thought about her, or taking it even farther into fantasizing or whatever that might look like. But I want to make that point very clear. It's like because I think sometimes we get so caught up in, I just shouldn't look at anything.
Yeah.
But that's actually going against the way God designed you.
Yeah.
Which doesn't actually solve the problem.
Right.
Or you're going to say, I know you tried jumping a couple times, Brandon.
Yeah. No, well, be it this example on lust or the anger one, I think both of them go back to that statement Jesus made about like that would have shocked the audience of it's like, how can I do this? And I think the anger one, unless we're like yelling angry, lots of us will brush past the smaller things and not think about it. But I think for a lot of men, this lust one especially is where it's easy to shut down and be like, well,
for sure. Especially
then how God can't do this.
I've heard many secular people talk about porn as in a positive light of like, you just need to limit it. Like, just put a cap on it. Like, 'cause that's easy.
Yeah.
But I think this one here for men specific, like this is a very difficult one. And I think for any guys listening, shoot, even when I read it, it's like, I don't think I could ever do that.
And on your own, I don't think you can.
Yeah. And so again, back to what we just talked about this is where Jesus is driving home, like, you can't do these things on your own. And there's a dependence that needs to happen. There's not a growing in independence. There's a growing independence. Yeah. Those are two very different things. Not independence, but in space dependence. Whereas in our culture today, as a dad, we're taught, raise them up to be independent, self-sufficient, so they can go out and go. We're taught from a very early age to be independent and individual, instead of teaching the value of dependence. That has become a very negative thing. But in these two examples, you can't do these independently. Right. It is impossible.
Yeah.
So there's my rant.
Thank you, Billy.
All right, Brandon, so answer. Are we supposed to claw our eyes out?
No, I think this is a good example of Jesus using hyperbole to make a point. That you want to go through extremes to avoid it.
Yeah, he wants to make sure, like, hey, this is I hold the value of marriage, but even the value of women incredibly high. And I'm going to drive this home by saying this is what it should be like. And then, even losing part of your body is better for your whole body. They say parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown in hell.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? For it is better to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown in hell. And I don't know if I had an answer.
I don't know. That is a good question.
That's one to go investigate, I think. Just thinking about, like, what does that mean? I guess the first thing that pops in my mind is to push out sin. Like, don't leave the door open to it at all. And if there is something that is causing you to sin, not necessarily your body part, but if there is something that is causing you to sin, you need to cut it out. Which means if you can't go in the bathroom with your phone, maybe you don't take your phone in there, or maybe you get a different phone.
Yeah.
Or if you can't watch certain shows that have explicit material without going down that path, like, maybe you shouldn't watch those shows, kinds of things. That's where my mind goes. I have no idea if that's actually what he's talking about, but that's what pops in my mind.
Yeah, no. Well, I guess we'll land it there because
I
don't have a good answer.
Yeah. So, where do we want to wrap up?
Well, I think that's actually a really good segue to wrap this up. So I hope, listeners, you guys have enjoyed going on this journey through this passage with us. If you're tracking along with us, great. If a lot of that went over your head and you're like, I don't get any of that when I read this on my own, how, like, it was almost a little bit of, made you feel a little demotivated to even try. Don't feel that way. I know for myself personally, 3 years ago, didn't know any of this stuff. And it's been just a slow, progressive curiosity, learning, having conversations with people like the guys in this room, and just kind of a passion growing inside of me to learn it. So just wanted to show what it can look like, all the stuff that we're talking about in this series. And it's really just one day at a time. Mm-hmm. Spending time in the Word with God, asking the Holy Spirit to reveal things. I think one of the key things that we didn't maybe do out loud so well today, but that was going on in our heads, is each thing we're like, what does that mean? I wonder what that means. Just having kind of a curious, open posture to it and asking those questions and taking the time. We talked about reading plans and how those can be great. When you do this type of reading, I'd maybe put that reading plan on pause so that you don't get caught up with, I have to be on this today, so that you can really slow down and ask those questions and start looking. The internet, there's good resources and bad resources out there, but there are a lot of resources. And I think most importantly, though, is community in your local church. Having these conversations with other like-minded Christians that are interested in it as well.
For sure. Yeah, no, I think the thing I would just say at the end is, like, you have permission to ask questions about the things that are in the Bible.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
I think for a long time there is a perspective that, hey, you just here's the Bible, and you just need to say yes and believe everything that's in it. Don't ask questions. Just say yes.
Well, it's God's truth. So if I don't understand
why should I do that? Why should I question it? Why should I have any doubts about any of these things? All that is okay.
Yeah.
Under all these places where Brandon and I have asked questions in these, man, it reveals the layers and the depth of Scripture. And it's so cool. Those little pieces of treasure just buried all under these words. And that only comes through asking questions. And so you have permission to do that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this series on our journey through the Bible, kind of taking an overview of it and how to dive in as you're reading through it. We do not. What is our next series on, Billy? Do you remember?
I don't.
Okay. Well,
you have to tune in next time to listen.
We promise we'll have it ready by the time we record. Until then, we invite you to jump over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from and leave us a review. It helps more listeners like yourself to find us, and we would greatly appreciate that. You can also check us out online at fishingformenministries.org or on Instagram and LinkedIn. Billy's putting out these really cool 2-minute tackles. I show up every once in a while as well. We're hoping to get some other people on there too. We'll see. But you can find us again on Instagram and LinkedIn. Search under Fishing for Men Ministries. We'll catch you at the next episode. Bye.